Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to Utility Sports. In today's video, we're going to be discussing the quarterback carousel, what to expect this offseason, who's going to be in, and who's going to be out for various teams. But before we jump into the video, I just want to urge all of you to hit that like button. Let's see if we can get 25 likes on this video. That'd be really awesome if we can. And now jumping forward, Austin, we have Matthew Stafford of the Detroit Lions here. His 2020 stats, he was actually really solid this year. Obviously posted a 5-11 record with the Lions this year. Obviously quite a few issues on that team, though. Doesn't all fall on Stafford's shoulder. He's on his shoulder, sorry. He'll turn 33 in February. Do you think Stafford is in or out for the Detroit Lions?
For me personally, I think he's in pretty much regardless if they draft a quarterback or not. I think that if they do decide to select a quarterback, that they would keep him around for at least one season, let the rookie quarterback sit behind him, learn. But ultimately, I think a lot of Detroit Lion fans give him a lot more flack than he deserves. Obviously, he hasn't been posting the winning records, but there hasn't been a ton around him to be able to do so. I think now with DeAndre Swift, and hopefully they can get Kenny Golladay re-signed. TJ Hawkinson is obviously going to be there for a while under his rookie deal. But just looking at Matt Stafford as a whole, he has the ability to throw to all three levels as a quarterback. He's arguably the toughest quarterback in the entire league. He takes so many hits on a week-to-week basis. I mean, it was really inspiring that he actually still played in this Week 17 matchup versus the Vikings, considering that he was super banged up. There was nothing to play for. Obviously, he still is a competitor. He went out and competed. And we saw him when he got folded up the other week, absolutely just got crushed with his back. But at this point, I think you have to look at Matt Stafford as a true competitor. He's a guy that I think you still can win with in this league.
Yeah,
Obviously,
definitely.
I do think he is still, a top 15 quarterback holistically.
Yeah, definitely. I think so as well. We've seen some of him. We've seen him in the past deal with shoulder injuries, back injuries, a few other things for Stafford. And the Detroit Lions have been really blessed, I think, to have Stafford. During their up years, Stafford had been balling out. A big reason why offensively that they were, moving forward with guys like Golden Tate and so on that roster. And now Stafford, he's going to give them a shot week in, week out. They're not a really strong team holistically. Matt Patricia was a terrible hire. I think most Lions fans would agree with that. And I just don't see Stafford as the problem there in Detroit, really. I think he's a competitor, like you said. He keeps them in games, and maybe down the stretch he doesn't, win games all that much for the Detroit Lions. But if they had a little bit better infrastructure around him, I think that the narrative on him could flip really quickly. And I think there is a really big divide in Detroit fans. Some really seem to want him out. With a young QB, I think that always gives a franchise hope when you have a young QB. But you also have to be really realistic about what young QBs come in. Like, remember, Stafford was the first overall pick in his draft. He was the no-brainer first overall pick. And yet, they want him out now at this point. Imagine what maybe the guy who goes like 10th overall in this class could end up being. It's not always sunshine and roses when you draft a QB, and I think a lot of fans need to stay a little bit more level-headed about that, considering Matthew Stafford. Now into the next QB, we have another NFC North team here with the Chicago Bears and Mitch Trubisky. He's played quite well this year after coming in again for Nick Foles. Obviously got benched early, came back, has really shined with a 6-3 record in his starts. What do you think about Trubisky? Is he in or is he out this season?
For me, I think he's out this season. I think Chicago Bears fans have had enough. I think the front office and Matt Nagy have ultimately had enough of Mr. Trubisky. Both quarterbacks on the roster are not the future. I think he will be out. I do think there will be a trade leverage of the veteran QB market. A guy like Sam Darnold, Matt Stafford, Matt Ryan. All of those guys could come into play as trade pieces. We're not exactly sure, obviously, where it stands with Matt Stafford since we don't have any idea, who the GM or head coach will be. But at this point, I think you have to really look at that trade market for Chicago. Obviously, Mitch Trubisky he goes way too high, way too low. There's just way too much inconsistency with him. Obviously, I don't think he was ever deserving of his Pro Bowl appearance that he had. I'm not high on Mitch Trubisky. I don't think a lot of people are, except for a few fans far and in between. But I'm not exactly sure how you feel, but I think he will be out.
Yeah, I definitely think that they should be exploring ways to get him out. Now, I don't know if he'll necessarily be out. It kind of depends on that trade market, like you're saying. If a team's asking too much for a certain player, they might roll it back with Trubisky, but they did decline his fifth-year option worth $20+ million. So that is something that's going to be worth monitoring for the Chicago Bears. And ultimately, it's going to be a tough decision for them. They're going to have to find a guy to replace him. I don't think Nick Foles is going to be that dude. You have to find someone else to run that quarterback position. Matt Nagy doesn't want to waste another year as the Chicago Bears head coach. And I think right now for Trubisky, this kind of just shows what I'm saying about Matthew Stafford too. He was the second overall pick in his class. The Bears moved up one spot to get him, and he just hasn't really proved to be worth that pick. That's really what my concern is for the Detroit Lions. If they were to draft a QB and move on from Stafford, is there's no guarantee that that QB is even going to be as good as Stafford or even near the level of Matthew Stafford. And I think Mitch Trubisky shows that as well. And I think the Bears will be looking to move on from him. Now into the Philadelphia Eagles, a team that's already seemingly moved on from Carson Wentz. However, it does sound like he would be open to a return to Philadelphia and a QB battle, but other reports say he wants out for sure. A little bit of controversy there in Philadelphia. Do you think Wentz will be an Eagle next year? Is he in or is he out?
I don't see there really being a chance. I'm going to be completely honest. I just think this relationship is damaged beyond repair for the Philadelphia Eagles and Carson Wentz. I think because Carson Wentz is a good guy and for public relation reasons, not to have pressing questions all throughout the start of the offseason. I think that's why he kind of said, yeah, I'd be open to it to kind of calm the storm down a little bit. But ultimately, I don't think Carson Wentz will be back. Obviously, his contract situation is going to be a huge reason why he would have to stay on the roster. But for me, I just don't see him coming back. I think relationship standpoint, him and Doug Peterson, it's not gonna be pretty. And a lot of players are actually mad at Doug Peterson right now with how they handled that Week 17 matchup. I think Doug Peterson doesn't really have control of the locker room anymore, doesn't have players' respect at this point. Carson Wentz, I think, will be out. It's all going to depend on the trade market for him.
What an incredible change of events, too, for Carson Wentz. You're looking a few years ago, he was probably the MVP frontrunner before tearing his ACL. After that, Nick Foles goes on to win the Super Bowl. Mentally, you got to be wondering where Carson Wentz is really at, because it seems like he's really dealt with a lot of issues after coming back from that ACL, maybe not trusting his knee fully. But in addition to that, it seems like he's just kind of not been that guy for Philadelphia anymore in the locker room. Obviously, we had heard that some veterans preferred Nick Foles being the starting QB for the Eagles. I'm sure that got to Carson Wentz a little bit. And then them going out and drafting Hurts this past year probably didn't help that either. And I think that Carson Wentz started to feel some of the pressure of not performing up to what he thinks he's capable of. And I think ultimately that's going to be what ends his tenure in Philadelphia with the Eagles. I do see him moving on as well. I'd be kind of interested into what teams could maybe be looking to move for him and what his value is. Do you have any idea what the Eagles will be asking for Carson Wentz in a trade?
I don't think they're going to be asking for a ton, just considering what his cap number is for a lot of teams having to take him in. So I could see kind of a similar value to what we've seen in Nick Foles last year, committed a 4th round pick. We could see a 3rd round pick, but I think 3rd to 4th round is kind of the range, just considering his contract. Obviously, Nick Foles had the big contract too, was able to move it to a QB needy team at that point in the offseason. So I think Carson Wentz commands a 3rd or a 4th at this point.
Yeah, definitely. And Indianapolis sticks out to me. Maybe Carson Wentz with a really great offensive line, something that Indianapolis has at this point, could get him back on track. Obviously, they need a couple weapons yet out wide, but I think Wentz in Indianapolis makes a lot of sense. Is that kind of where you would see the best fit for Carson Wentz at this point?
That's absolutely the best fit for pretty much any quarterback in the trade market. Possibly you could argue the Steelers, if they are in the market for a quarterback in the offseason. Really depends on what Big Ben does. But at this point, for me, Indianapolis is the number 1 spot for any of the quarterbacks that are currently on the trade market or that will be on the free agent market.
Yeah, definitely. Moving into now Sam Darnold. Obviously, he's going to be a guy on the trade market as well, more than likely, with Justin Fields likely being the number 2 overall pick for the New York Jets. That's not guaranteed, though, at this point. Is Sam Darnold in or out? Do you see the Jets going QB in the draft?
This is a really tough one for me because I could see both pathways of him staying and him going. But I think at the number 2 overall pick, I'm not exactly sure where Joe Douglas is thinking. But at this point, I think he would opt to go get his quarterback, the guy that he wants. So he would go Justin Fields at 2. That ultimately leaves Sam Darnold on the trade market. Once again, we could see Steelers and Colts be interested, and numerous amount of teams that are actually going to be on this list as potential options at this point. New England is another option, but I think Sam Darnold is in his, he just played his final season as a New York Jet.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing about Sam Darnold is I wasn't a big believer in him when he got to the Jets. I am a Jets fan, so I was really, really critical of that selection. I thought he turned the ball over too much. Didn't really show enough at USC to be worthy of the number 3 overall selection, especially how much we gave up to move up with the Indianapolis Colts. However, now at this point, the Colts could be getting him back in return. And I just think it's been a tough tenure for Darnold with the New York Jets. He came in with Todd Bowles as the coach. Obviously, that didn't work out. He got fired after Darnold's rookie season. And then he had 2 years of Adam Gase. That's really not the best situation for a young quarterback. He hasn't had good stability in the coaching department, and he also hasn't really had a lot of offensive success because Adam Gase came in as an offensive-minded coach, didn't get the job done, finished 31st and 32nd in offense in his 2 years there. Also, Todd Bowles, obviously being more defensive-minded, did not get the job done offensively for the New York Jets. They haven't surrounded him with a lot of pieces. That offensive line has been terrible for Darnold's 3 years. And I think a team like Indianapolis or Pittsburgh with a little bit more infrastructure around could let Sam Darnold shine a little bit more. Not that he'd be a great QB, but he could definitely look much better than he has for the New York Jets. And I'm hoping for him that is the case. Now, moving into the New England Patriots, AFC East team as well, Cam Newton, seemingly like this was going to be a one-and-done year for him with the New England Patriots. You know, his stats aren't terrible when you look at his completion percentage, yards per attempt. For him as a rushing QB, those are pretty solid. But obviously, just when you actually watch him eye test, didn't look great this year with the New England Patriots. He's turning 32 years old in May. Is Cam Newton in, or is he out of New England?
Yeah, I think this was, from the beginning, just a one-year trial period, and it just didn't really work out for New England. I think he is out going into this offseason. Cam Newton's obviously going to test the free agent market, and I guess we'll kind of see where he sits. He could be kind of like Jameis Winston in the sense where all the QB spots kind of fill up, and then he takes a backup role in a place where there's good infrastructure. It's very possible he signs on to a team that needs a quarterback, but it's very possible at the same time that he could be sitting as a backup quarterback. I'd say that's about 50-50 at this point, just considering that there's not a lot of teams that are looking for a guy of his play style necessarily. And obviously he's a rushing quarterback that turns 32 in May, and his body has a lot of miles on it as a whole. So for me, I think he is out of New England.
Yeah, it would be kind of hard for me as well to sell someone taking Cam Newton. We saw a really slow offseason for him last year until Tom Brady moved on from New England. New England finally came around, brought him in to replace Jarrett Stidham as the starter there. But I think, again, this offseason is just going to be hard for Cam Newton to find a job. And one guy we don't have on this list, Austin, you had mentioned him just now talking about Cam Newton, Jameis Winston. Do you see a pathway that he gets a job as a starter in the NFL, or do you think he's a backup yet again this coming season?
I think his best chance to be a starter in the league is right where he's at right now, and that is the New Orleans Saints. I'm kind of interested to see why they didn't really play him this season, whether or not they believed in him or they wanted to get a longer term extension done before they saw him play ultimately, because I think he could thrive in that New Orleans Saints system. Obviously, he has a lot of issues with, controlling the ball, not turning it over, but I'm kind of interested to see what kind of contract they would present him. I think that is his best chance is New Orleans. And there's a couple of other teams that might take a flyer, like Washington possibly. But at this point, I do see New Orleans as being the best possibility for him becoming a starter.
Yeah, definitely. Last offseason, we had heard about his LASIK surgery, also some of his weirder workouts that he posted on social media. Didn't really get to see him much this year. Is New Orleans hiding his talent and what they've seen from him in practice? Or were they just not sure about him, wanted to go with Taysom Hill, see what he could provide at QB? That is going to be the question surrounding Jameis Winston this offseason. Now into the Denver Broncos with Drew Lock. Obviously, GM John Elway did step down this offseason now. And Drew Lock did not build off of his shortened rookie season that he looked very, very good in. In fact, he kind of struggled a little bit in his sophomore season with the Denver Broncos. 16 touchdowns, 15 interceptions. Just did not win a lot of games. He's turning 20, or he is 24 right now. Will turn 25 in November. Do you see Drew Lock as the Broncos QB long-term, or do you think whoever the new GM comes in goes and gets their guy year one?
I'm going to actually say neither. I think it's going to be – I don't see him as a long-term guy, but I don't think they're going to replace him this year. I do think that they will give him one more year as the starting quarterback, kind of give him, another chance to succeed. Obviously, he didn't have Cortland Sutton this year. That's a big part of the reason for his struggles. His number one guy, his favorite target. Obviously, Noah Fant's going to continue to get better. KJ Hamler, obviously Jerry Jeudy's there. And plus you have two, decent running backs. So at this point, I think they will give Drew Lock one more chance to prove himself next year once they get healthier, even on the defensive side of the ball. And hopefully, team success and everything will carry him. But I think at this point, he will be at least one more year in Denver.
Yeah, that's how I see it as well. The 2021 season is going to be a trial not only for Drew Lock, but also for head coach Vic Fangio there in Denver is my assumption. I see it very possible that the Broncos can move on from both of those two ahead of the 2022 season. But 2021 is going to be a big year for Locke. He's going to have to take that third-year quarterback jump that we've seen with some QBs. Other QBs really tend to take a step back in year 3. Will Locke take a step forward? Will he take a step back, or will he continue to play at this level? That's yet to be seen. But the Denver Broncos are going to be a team that will be looking at QB long-term, probably not whether or not it's this draft or next draft. That's yet to be seen as well. But Drew Lock obviously did not impress this season. Now on to a team we had mentioned earlier about Jameis Winston. Alex Smith of the Washington football team, definitely the comeback player of the year. I just want to say that. Let's take a moment to appreciate Alex Smith. His return from an absolutely gruesome injury would have ended the career of most quarterbacks. His toughness, his desire to play the game is definitely noticed. And I don't want to put any, damper on that for this season. He played very well for what he's coming back from, but long-term, you're just looking at a different replacement option for Washington. He's going to turn 37 in May. Obviously, they're in the playoffs, so maybe if they string together a win against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you're looking at a really, really great season for Washington at that point. I don't find it likely they beat Tampa, but it's possible. What do you think about Alex Smith? Is he in or is he out next season?
I'm going to actually say he is in. That's not to say that he is the starting quarterback, but I think he's back. I think that they are going to bring in a young quarterback like possibly a Jameis Winston or somebody like that, or potentially draft a quarterback in the later part of the first round where they would be selecting. But at this point, I think that they love Alex Smith's leadership presence. I think he's a Ron Rivera guy, obviously gives you a steady quarterback option if the guy you bring in does not work out or you want him to sit another year. He's the ultimate bridge quarterback in this situation.
Yeah, definitely. And what a wonderful situation there in Washington, too. Wonderful storyline. Ron Rivera obviously overcoming his cancer this season. That's wonderful for him, for the NFL. Super glad about that. And also Alex Smith coming back from his leg infection from his surgery. Just absolutely great storylines there. I'm wishing Alex Smith the best. I'm wishing the Washington football team the best as they continue to move forward. Now we have Derek Carr. Obviously, he's played very, very well this season, but it just doesn't seem like John Gruden's the biggest believer in Derek Carr. Marcus Mariota did get to play just a little bit this year when Carr went out of the Chargers game with an injury. Do you see Derek Carr as the long-term option in Vegas, maybe a short-term option still, or is he out completely?
I think he is for sure short-term, possibly long-term, but I see more short-term. Like you had mentioned with John Gruden, he's just not the biggest fan of Derek Carr from what he's shown and the belief that he's really put in him. Obviously, I was interested when they brought in Mariota. I was kind of interested to see if possibly Mariota would overcome Derek Carr, but obviously Derek Carr from a statistical standpoint and, using the eye test has played pretty well this season. I think he deserves a lot more credit than he's getting. I think he's kind of in that Stafford situation where, he's just not getting the love he deserves. And as they continue to build that team, Mike Mayock and John Gruden continue to build that offense, he's going to look better and better. Obviously, they went and got a weapon in Henry Ruggs, but I'd like to see them continue to add to that offense to, further aid Derek Carr's career.
Right, definitely. And you're looking at that team that went 8-8 this season. Obviously lost some close ones. Didn't really shine in some of the games that I feel like they could have. A lot of that's on the defense as well. Their defense needs to really improve. I think if they get a stronger defense around Derek Carr, they're going to be a better team. I could look at them even being a playoff team next year. It's going to be tough in the AFC. Teams like Miami even missed out this year, and they're going to get better as well. He is turning 30 in March. They would save $19 million if they cut him, but I just don't really see that being the case this year. I think he's in as well. Now into a QB that's got a similar situation with the dead money if he's cut before June 1st, but his future is definitely more up in question. They could save approximately $27 million if they cut him. Are the San Francisco 49ers moving on from Jimmy Garoppolo? Is he in or is he out?
This is one of the tougher ones to decide ultimately because of the money that they would free up with his contract being cut. Obviously, you have marked there the $2.5 million in dead money only if he's cut before June 1st. I think that they would be willing to move on ultimately to free up some money, and then they could draft a quarterback ultimately to replace Jimmy Garoppolo. A guy like Trey Lance possibly would be considered in this. But if they decide to not go that route, they would obviously keep him instead of trying to leverage a trade for a veteran quarterback because it's more about the money. But a lot of people love Jimmy Garoppolo, and a lot of people don't like Jimmy Garoppolo. There's a lot of divide in where you think he is as a quarterback. He is a proven winner in San Francisco, but a lot of it has to do with the infrastructure and defense that they have in San Francisco as well. I'm not saying that this is the worst quarterback in the league, but I just think he has been slightly overrated due to his ability to win in San Francisco. But that's not to say that, he's not a viable quarterback. He's not a guy that you can win with, because he definitely can win in this league. But obviously, unfortunate injuries this season. I really would have liked to have seen him play. I think that he's a sneaky option if, he is cut to go to New England again, because obviously he's the Bill Belichick guy. And I would like to see a reunion there.
Yeah, I definitely think New England is the obvious spot for Jimmy Garoppolo if things turn sour here in San Francisco. And one thing about this, too, is we're not saying that Jimmy Garoppolo is a bad quarterback. We're not saying he's not a starting level QB. You're just looking at the salary cap picture here, and saving that amount of money could go a really long ways in keeping together that infrastructure that you had mentioned on that defense, keeping some of their offensive players around as well. And if they can do that, bring in a young QB with a fifth-year option in the first round, move on from Garoppolo, save all that money, it does make a lot of sense for the 49ers that way to act in that direction, especially with some of the inconsistencies he's had at that QB position. We saw it in the Super Bowl. He didn't really play great in that game. There's some that believe he's holding the 49ers back. There's others that believe that he is a key reason in why they win. I just think ultimately they'll be a good team without him if they did move on from him and address the QB spot in another way. But it's not that he's a bad QB, and I think he could really shine in a different situation. I just think it's more about the contract at this point for Jimmy Garoppolo. And he's also our last QB here in the QB carousel. If there's anyone else that you guys are interested in hearing our thoughts on, definitely let us know in the comments below. Also, don't forget to hit that like button. We definitely love to get to at least 25 likes on this video. So please, please, please do so, and we'll catch you guys in the next video.